In the dim glow of the arena's backstage, the hum of anticipation pulsed like a living thing. The crowd's roar seeped through concrete walls, a restless sea waiting to erupt. Mike Tyson leaned against the cold steel beam, his fists wrapped tight, gaze steady but carrying a weight even he couldn't quite shake. It had been years since he felt this level of anticipation, not from fear, but from the sheer unpredictability of what lay ahead. They were calling it a clash of legends. Two men from different worlds, colliding under the same lights for reasons that went far beyond just proving who was better. This was about legacy, about pride, about leaving no doubt. Across the corridor, Kurt Angle was preparing in his own way. The Olympic gold medalist, built from grit and forged through pain, knew how to rise when the stakes were highest. Wrestling had been his kingdom, but tonight he was stepping into another man's world. That fact alone made his blood sing with excitement. The unfamiliarity of the boxing ring, its simplicity and brutality, was almost refreshing. The rules were different, but the essence remained. Two men, their skills, their willpower, and nothing else. He'd endured broken necks, torn muscles, injuries that would have sidelined lesser men. And tonight, he was ready to prove he could conquer another mountain. They promoted the fight like it was a spectacle of eras. Tyson, the brutal brawler who once sent fear rippling through the heavyweight division like a primal force. Angle, the decorated warrior whose mastery over the wrestling mat had made him a legend in his own right. The match had been labeled everything from an exhibition to a grudge match, though both men understood it was something far more personal. For Tyson, it was a chance to reclaim the savage elegance of his prime. For Angle, it was an opportunity to prove his resilience stretched beyond the sport he dominated. The negotiations had been complicated, with promoters hyping every detail, until even the most mundane aspects felt like seismic events. The weigh-ins alone drew millions of views, Tyson's iron gaze locking with Angle's intense, almost analytical stare. Commentators speculated endlessly. Would Tyson's fists shatter Angle's resolve? Or would Angle's conditioning and technical prowess find a way to neutralize the raw power Tyson wielded? The questions only fueled the fire, and the fire had spread everywhere. It was no longer just a fight, it was a cultural moment. But underneath all the noise and speculation, there was something neither man could ignore. Respect. They had never crossed paths before, but each understood the sacrifice and obsession that drove the other. And yet, respect didn't mean mercy. Tyson's fists had laid waste to champions, and Angle's grappling skills had humbled giants. Each believed their style, their discipline, was the one that would prevail. Neither was willing to be proven wrong. As the minutes trickled down, the energy in the stadium swelled to a fever pitch. Fans from every corner of the globe tuned in, their eyes locked on screens, their voices echoing in digital chat rooms and living rooms alike. It wasn't just about the fight. It was about the idea of two legends meeting on unfamiliar ground. There was a hunger to see whether Tyson's ferocity could break through Angle's precision. And for every person who believed Tyson's power would overwhelm the wrestler, there was another who believed Angle's resilience would outlast the storm. Back in his locker room, Tyson adjusted his gloves, feeling their familiar weight. Every punch he'd thrown in his life seemed to flood back to him, a brutal symphony of muscle memory. But this wasn't just muscle and speed. It was instinct. He fought men who outweighed him, who outreached him, who tried to outthink him. But none of them had been Kurt Angle, and that single fact kept his adrenaline spiked, his senses sharpened like blades. In the opposite room, Angle paced with deliberate calm. He was used to controlling the environment, dictating the pace. But Tyson was different. Tyson was chaos incarnate. But if there was one thing Angle had mastered, it was the art of adapting. He faced opponents who tried to bend his will, to force him into desperation. He never allowed it. No matter the odds, he found a way. And tonight would be no different, even if it meant stepping into a storm. The walkouts were a clash of energies. Tyson emerged first, his presence alone enough to ignite the crowd into a frenzy. Cheers, boos, chants. Everything blended into a single roar that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. He moved with the same controlled fury that had defined his prime, each step purposeful, every breath deliberate. This wasn't a comeback. It was a reckoning. Then came Angle. The crowd's reaction was just as wild, a mix of admiration and skepticism. Could a wrestler, no matter how skilled, how determined, stand toe-to-toe with Tyson's devastating power? Angle's entrance had the precision of a warrior who understood the gravity of the moment but refused to be swallowed by it. His eyes scanned the ring, studying it, understanding the parameters of this new battlefield. As they stood across from each other, the noise of the crowd became a distant hum. For a moment, it was just the two of them, locked into a silent exchange that carried more weight than any pre-fight interview or promotional footage ever could. Tyson's fists tightened, his shoulders coiling like springs ready to explode. Angle's stance remained steady, his breathing calm, his gaze unflinching. The bell hadn't rung yet, but the fight had already begun. It was in the way they studied each other, every glance a calculation, every shift in posture a message. Tyson, the predator whose fists had shattered men's dreams. Angle, the technician whose skill and determination had never been questioned. Two paths converging at a point neither man had ever expected. They approached the center of the ring as the referee delivered the final instructions. Neither broke eye contact. Tyson's lips twitched into a near snarl, his hunger for the fight clear in every line of his face. Angle's expression remained unreadable, his composure seemingly unbreakable. It was a standoff built on pure tension, the air between them vibrating with the anticipation of violence. The referee stepped back, his voice ringing out over the restless crowd. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The bell's shrill cry split the air, signaling the start of something both brutal and beautiful. Tyson lunged forward, fists coiled like wrecking balls, every ounce of his strength unleashed with the force of a charging bull. But Angle wasn't standing still. He moved with a precision that seemed almost unnatural, his feet gliding across the canvas with the grace of a man who had spent his life perfecting the art of movement. Their first exchange was explosive. Tyson's fists cutting through the air with lethal intent, Angle's body weaving and sidestepping, like he could see the punches coming before they even left Tyson's gloves. It was a battle of power versus precision, of instinct against calculation, and neither man seemed willing to give an inch. But just when it seemed like Tyson's relentless assault would overwhelm Angle's defenses, a sudden shift in the air hinted that something was about to change. Tyson's fists hammered forward with a fury that felt almost primal, each blow thrown with the kind of force that had once left entire divisions in ruins. Angle's movements were precise but strained, his defensive patterns tightening as Tyson closed the distance, pressing the advantage with sheer brutality. The crowd's roars climbed higher, excitement mixed with disbelief as Angle absorbed punishment that would have broken most fighters. Yet it wasn't just endurance that kept him standing. It was calculation. Something about the way he moved suggested that every step, every block, was part of a plan being assembled piece by piece. Tyson sensed it too. His instincts, honed by years of combat, detected something beneath Angle's cautious approach. It was like hunting a prey that understood the game just as well as the predator. The punches continued to rain down, but Angle's eyes stayed sharp, his mind clear despite the relentless barrage. He was testing Tyson's timing, searching for patterns, vulnerabilities, anything that could be turned against the former champion. But there was more to it than that. Angle was no longer content just to defend. He was preparing to counter. And then it happened. An opening so subtle most would have missed it. Tyson overcommitted on a right hook, his momentum carrying him forward just a fraction too far. Angle's body coiled and exploded with a speed that left the crowd gasping. He ducked beneath Tyson's swing, his shoulder driving hard into Tyson's midsection, with the kind of power only an Olympic wrestler could generate. Tyson staggered backward, momentarily stunned by the unexpected maneuver. The shift in momentum was dramatic. Tyson's aggression was met with sudden, ruthless precision. Angle pressed forward, not with punches, but with grappling techniques adapted for the ring. He used angles and leverage to disrupt Tyson's rhythm, forcing the heavyweight to reconsider his approach. The crowd, initially drawn by the promise of Tyson's crushing power, now found itself captivated by Angle's resilience and adaptability. He was proving he wasn't just a wrestler stepping into unfamiliar territory. He was a warrior willing to rewrite the rules. Tyson's frustration simmered beneath the surface. He was used to being the hammer, not the nail. But the way Angle manipulated distance and timing felt alien, almost infuriating. Tyson's fists struck air more often than flesh, and when he did land a blow, Angle found ways to roll with it, minimizing the damage. Yet Tyson wasn't just a powerhouse. He was a fighter who thrived under pressure, who had made a career out of turning desperation into destruction. Angle's strategy evolved with each passing minute. He began mixing his strikes with short, calculated clinches, using his grappling expertise to sap Tyson's energy. to wear him down in ways the boxer had rarely experienced. And the more Tyson tried to break free, the more Angle seemed to thrive. But Tyson wasn't out of the fight. Far from it. Beneath the surface of his mounting frustration, something else was brewing. A resolve as dangerous as it was relentless. Just when it seemed Angle's strategy was succeeding, Tyson unleashed a burst of ferocity that caught everyone off guard. He shifted tactics, abandoning the wild hooks and overhand punches that had defined his early assault. Instead, he began throwing vicious, compact blows aimed at the body, punches designed not just to hurt, but to erode Angle's stamina, to tear down the foundation of his defense. The change was immediate and brutal. Angle's breathing grew heavier, his movements slightly less fluid. Tyson had found a crack and was intent on splitting it wide open. Yet Angle refused to break. His endurance was almost unnatural, forged through years of punishing training, and an iron will that bordered on madness. But even his resilience had limits. Tyson's fists continued to pound away, each strike landing with a force that seemed to rattle the very air. And still, Angle persisted, his eyes locked onto Tyson's, with a determination that bordered on defiant. But then came the twist no one anticipated. As the brutal exchange continued, Tyson's foot slipped on a slick patch of canvas. Sweat or blood, it didn't matter. His balance faltered for a split second, but it was enough. Angle pounced, his instincts sharpened by years of seizing opportunities others might overlook. With a speed that left the crowd breathless, he drove his shoulder into Tyson's chest, forcing him backward and into the ropes. For the first time, Tyson looked genuinely rattled. His breathing was heavy, his arms lowered just enough to reveal the wear of the fight. Angle seized the moment, launching a flurry of punches that, while lacking Tyson's destructive power, were precise and unrelenting. The crowd erupted, their cheers a thunderous wave that seemed to shake the arena itself. Tyson fought back, his fists swinging with renewed urgency. But Angle's relentless pressure was beginning to wear him down. It was a spectacle unlike anything the audience had expected. Tyson, the man who once dismantled opponents with terrifying efficiency, was being tested by an opponent who refused to play by the usual rules. And yet, the fight was far from over. Tyson's eyes burned with something beyond mere anger. It was a hunger, a refusal to be bested by a man whose skills were so different from his own. Angle pressed his advantage, his confidence growing with every successful exchange. But as he moved forward, Tyson's gaze sharpened, a predator's eyes locking onto its target. Angle's aggressiveness had left him open, and Tyson's instincts detected the flaw with ruthless precision. Suddenly, Tyson's fists came alive again, launching a counterattack that was as brutal as it was brilliant. A left hook connected with devastating accuracy, the impact thudding against Angle's jaw with a force that sent a collective gasp through the crowd. Angle stumbled but refused to fall. His body swayed, knees threatening to buckle, but his determination held him upright. Tyson advanced, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. Whatever advantage Angle had managed to create was now slipping away, but the wrestler wasn't finished. Even as his vision blurred, his mind worked feverishly, searching for a way to turn the tide once more. Just when it seemed Tyson would crush Angle beneath the weight of his fists, a sudden movement at ringside caught both fighters' attention. A figure emerged from the shadows, striding toward the ring, with a purpose that left the crowd murmuring in confusion. The referee's gaze snapped toward the newcomer, his whistle shrill as he attempted to maintain order. The distraction was brief, but in the chaos of combat, even the slightest lapse in focus could be catastrophic. Tyson's eyes flicked toward the approaching figure, just long enough for Angle to seize the moment. With a desperate surge of strength, Angle launched a takedown that drove Tyson to the canvas, the impact shaking the ring and leaving both men gasping for air. And as they lay there, the mystery of the unexpected intruder remained unanswered, casting a shadow over a fight that had already defied every expectation. Tyson's body slammed against the canvas, the sudden takedown rattling the entire ring. A stunned silence swept over the crowd, their voices choked off by the sheer audacity of what had just occurred. Angle remained on top of Tyson, his grip ironclad, refusing to relinquish the advantage he had fought so hard to claim. It was a moment born out of instinct and desperation, yet executed with the precision of a master technician. But the confusion caused by the figure approaching the ring lingered, its presence a question left unanswered. Tyson's breaths were labored, his chest heaving as he fought against Angle's relentless control. For the first time in the match, The raw power that had always defined him seemed unable to break free. Angle's hold was merciless. His body pressed tight against Tyson's to neutralize the threat of those destructive fists. But Tyson was nothing if not relentless. Inch by inch, he clawed his way back, his shoulders rolling with effort, his neck straining as he twisted free from Angle's grip. They scrambled to their feet, bodies slick with sweat and bruised from the brutality of their exchange. Tyson's fists shot out again, a flurry of strikes meant to overwhelm, but Angle's endurance remained. He blocked and countered, refusing to be consumed by the storm Tyson unleashed. Yet, something about the approaching figure continued to gnaw at the edges of their focus. The crowd had turned their attention toward the intruder, their shouts a mix of excitement and confusion. Whoever it was, they were walking with an air of authority, cutting through the chaos like a knife. Angle's eyes flicked toward the figure for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Tyson capitalized on the momentary lapse, his right hand connecting with Angle's ribs in a crushing blow that echoed through the arena. Angle staggered, his body instinctively curling to protect his side. Tyson pressed the advantage, his punches snapping forward with renewed ferocity. The ropes trembled as the two men collided, their struggle drawing gasps and cheers from the restless crowd. But then, the intruder's voice boomed through the arena, carried by a microphone that seemed to amplify the tension already thick in the air. It was a voice both fighters recognized instantly, Dana White, the UFC president himself, his presence an enigma that left the audience buzzing with speculation. His words were direct, slicing through the noise with surgical precision. He announced that this fight, regardless of outcome, had captured something rare and spectacular. He proposed something even grander, a rematch, but this time, under a hybrid set of rules designed to test both fighters' strengths to their limits. Boxing and grappling, fused into a single, unforgiving challenge. Tyson's eyes flashed with interest, the prospect of another battle stoking a fire that had never truly died. Angle's expression was harder to read, but there was a gleam in his gaze that suggested he welcomed the challenge. Their rivalry had evolved beyond mere competition. It had become something larger, something that could redefine their legacies if they dared to embrace it. But as Dana White continued speaking, his proposal wasn't the only twist the night had to offer. Another figure emerged from the crowd, someone Tyson and Angle had both crossed paths with in different eras. Brock Lesnar. The audience erupted, their cheers and gasps merging into a frenzy of excitement. Lesnar's presence was like gasoline poured onto an open flame. His intentions were clear from the way he climbed into the ring, eyes locked on both fighters with a predator's hunger. Lesnar took the microphone from White, his voice a low growl as he made his intentions known. He challenged both men, declaring himself the true crossover athlete, the one who had conquered both the world of wrestling and mixed martial arts. He wanted in on their rematch. He wanted to prove he was the most dominant force to ever step into a ring, cage, or arena. The challenge was no longer between two men. It had grown into something much more unpredictable and dangerous. Tyson and Angle exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The fight they had just endured had pushed them to their limits. But the thought of another battle, one that included a new opponent of Lesnar's caliber, was both daunting and thrilling. The crowd sensed it too, their anticipation building into a deafening roar that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the arena. Dana White, seizing the moment, announced that negotiations would begin immediately, a triple threat bout, something the world had never seen before. The audience's reaction was electric, their cheers a declaration that they were witnessing history in the making. Tyson nodded, his grin fierce and unapologetic. Angle's determination only seemed to harden, his posture straightening despite the pain rippling through his body, and Lesnar stood there like a force of nature, his presence demanding attention, respect, and fear all at once. The night ended not with a victor, but with a promise. A new battle awaited them all, one that would test their strength, their skill, and their willpower in ways none of them had ever experienced. Tyson's fists clenched, Angle's gaze sharpened, and Lesnar's smirk widened as they each considered what lay ahead. For Tyson, it was a chance to reclaim the power that had once made him the most feared man on the planet. For Angle, it was an opportunity to prove his versatility and resilience in a world that had always valued brute force over technique. And for Lesnar, it was a challenge to assert his dominance over two legends who dared to step into his domain. As the cameras cut away, the crowd's excitement continued to echo through the arena, a reminder that sometimes The greatest battles aren't about victory or defeat. They're about the pursuit of something greater, something timeless. And as the lights dimmed and the fighters retreated to their corners, one thing was certain: the world would be watching when they stepped into the ring again.